Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU SportsLab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gonna teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Welcome to episode 625 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is a radio show and podcast that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports, from institutions large and small, from the NEIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to KSUH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, Ralph Cooper, multi-Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper, in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. As we start to bring everybody on, we also have Brian Fulford, Wilton Jackson II, as he's quenching his thirst, as he gets ready to show out and show up. With that being said, Wilton, how are you doing today?
I am doing good, Doc. It's glad to be back. I know I've missed a couple episodes, so to be amongst the older, more seasoned professors is always good to be in good hands.
I like that. You new tenure track professors with the full professors, as they say. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency LLC. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. With that being said, Brian Fulford, how are you doing today?
I'm driving the bus, Coach. I'm driving the bus, Doc. I'm driving.
I appreciate it.
I'm feeling good right now. It feels good to be a Raptor, waking up in second place.
Yeah, especially on the men's basketball side, it's feeling good out there. You deserve it.
Florida A&M is a basketball school, baby. We are a basketball school.
I like that. No doubt about it. Go ahead and get your basketball on.
I love it.
Charles Bishop, how you doing today? I see you got a chuckle out of that too.
Yeah, I did. But doing well, Doc. I got my throat back. I'm like Wilton. I'm getting a little swallow, but had a great time calling the Cactus Jack Classic games this past weekend with Brian. And a great production crew, tremendous job this past weekend in terms of giving out some baseball. So I enjoyed that tremendously.
I see Coach Tremaine Jackson is out there at Prairie View blowing up the social media platforms as he talking about his desires to go to Atlanta. He looks like he got his Prairie View A&M football pledging out there on the front yard.
I like that.
I just want everybody to know that Prairie View A&M University is non-hazing institution organization. So let me say that he's doing a little intake process for the football team. Let me put it that way.
There we go. I like that.
Wilton got a chuckle out of that. With that being said, let me go to you, Charles, and stick with you in regards to some of the HBCU news of the day.
Yeah, let's start off. Let's take a look at the SWAC. Women's Basketball Weekly Honors as the Southwestern Athletic Conference is named Alabama's Kayla Walker, Florida A&M's Sydney Hendricks, and Arkansas Pine Bluff's De'Ara Allen as its SWAC Women's Basketball Players of the Week for their impressive performances. So let's take a look at the Player of the Week in Kayla Walker. She averaged 19.5 points per game for Alabama A&M during their contest against Mississippi Valley State and Arkansas Pine Bluff. She shot 52% from the field, ranking first on her team in points and field goal percentage. The Impact Player of the Week was Sydney Hendricks. She was a key contributor this past weekend for FAMU, and she averaged 17 points per game to go along with 8.5 rebounds. And then the newcomer of the week was De'Ara Allen from Arkansas Pine Bluff. She averaged 22 points per game for the Lady Lions, her home games against Alabama State and Alabama A&M. So those are your SWAC women's players of the week.
Good stuff, Charles. We'll go to you, Wilton Jackson. The second, what direction do you want to go in terms of your HBCU news of the day?
I'm going to go with the MEAC weekly honors on the women's side. We're going to start with Coppin State forward. Layla Lawrence was named the MEAC Player of the Week and Defensive Player of the Week, while Howard guard Sanaya King earned Rookie of the Week honors. Lawrence recorded a double-double with 20 points, 18 rebounds, with 12 of those coming on the defensive side. In a 63-53 win over North Carolina Central, she added 2 assists, 1 block, and 1 steal while shooting 90% from the free throw line. And then King averaged 11 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, and 1 steal during a 2-0 week for the Bison. In a win against Maryland Eastern Shore, King finished with 11 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 block, and 1 steal. She followed with 11 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and 1 steal in the win over Delaware State. And that's on the MEAC side of weekly honors.
Good stuff. Brian Fulford, what are you doing today?
Well, Doc, I was trying to see if I could find the final information here. I want to make sure I have it here from the Cactus Jack, but maybe we'll come back to that later. So I'll keep to the script and make mention of the HBCU softball tournament. Prairie View A&M Lady Panthers go undefeated in the HBCU softball tournament. Now, I got a question: who wrote this script? Because I think I know of a couple other teams that went undefeated, including none other than those ladies from Florida A&M. But I understand who wrote the script, so it's okay. I'm gonna just read the script here.
I'm just saying, Prairie A&M is a softball. Softball business.
That is a good point. They are a softball school. Good point.
And a lot of the games got rained out, so they couldn't do a full tournament.
That was disappointing. It was a great opportunity, great, well put together event. Unfortunately, weather kind of got in the way. But the tournament we're speaking of is the HBCU softball tournament held in Newton County, Turner Lake Park in Covington, Georgia. It's scheduled to be a 3-day tournament featuring, I know of at least 10 schools, but I heard there was at least 16. I know there was a plethora of MEAC and SWAC schools that were there. In terms of Prairie View, Janiyah Thomas collected 4 hits on 4 at-bats as Prairie View A&M defeated South Carolina State 11-4 on Friday morning. Big first inning leads Prairie View past the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Prairie View scored 6 runs in the first, which helped them defeat UMES 9-1 on Friday. Prairie View was also triumphant over North Carolina A&T State 10-6 on Saturday in its 3rd game, and that is the Leonard Moody Intercollegiate Invitational, the name of the tournament. Prairie View broke through after a 2-2 tie in the 5th to knock off the North Carolina Central Eagles 11-6 on Saturday. Prairie View's game versus Howard was scheduled Sunday, but it was canceled due to weather. And what I liked about the format is many of obviously, whether it be Prairie View, Florida A&M, Jackson State, all SWAC schools, right? They didn't play each other. They were all playing against either MEAC, or former MEAC schools, because North Carolina A&T was there as well. So you could say MEAC/former MEAC schools. And that's, I know Florida A&M won its 3 games. Obviously, Prairie View won its 3. Charles, I don't know how Jackson State did. Obviously, we were in Houston covering baseball. So, or Wilton, maybe you two know how Jackson State did. But I think the SWAC probably fared pretty well, it sounds like, in the games that were played.
Great update. One correction there. Prairie View won 4 games, and maybe that's potentially how they were able to win the Watley Cup champions. They defeated South Carolina State on Friday 11-4. Then they also beat Maryland Eastern Shore 9-1 on Friday as well. Then on Saturday, they took on North Carolina A&T While they beat Maryland East Shore 9-1, they beat North Carolina A&T, I should say 10-6. And then they had North Carolina Central. They defeated also on Saturday 11-6 after the game was tied 2-2 in the fifth. They were supposed to play Howard on Sunday, which has been interesting. Howard was pretty good last year. See what they're going to do this year. But as you were mentioning, the weather delay in FAMU had 2 games canceled. But they do some type of points to recognize the champion. So they had the most points with the quote-unquote impressive 5,030 points to claim the Watley Cup at this year's Leonard Moody HBCU Collegiate Invitational. But I like the way you broke that down and said that, Brian Fulford, in regards to how they make sure teams play teams that they don't normally play. It's fascinating. Good stuff. Shout out to those that are putting together the Watley Cup champions. Fascinating. You see this with women's sports quite a bit. Obviously, at one time, Langston was big in terms of being able to get some teams in. Watley championship now seem to kind of taking off. We see that a little bit. Tennis, HBCU champions outside of those sports, but not in basketball. Maybe that will change over the years. With that being said, you do have the HBCU basketball championship tournament coming out that will be played in Charlotte. It'll be interesting to see how that goes in its inaugural season. With that being said, Brian, you ready to go back for your update that you were going to give?
Well, yeah, and let me add, as I love to do my research here. Jackson State went 3-0, defeating Hampton 3-2, Coppin State 7-4, and A&T 73. Our good friend of the program, Varick Williams, confirmed that Southern went 3-1. So it looks like the SWAC is a softball conference. That's what it looks like.
So it's going to be interesting with all these teams starting off pretty well, and they face each other at some point, if nothing else, in the tournament. You have FAMU, Jack State, and Prairie View going undefeated, and Southern went 3-1. Wow, fascinating. Should be interesting as we get a little further along into what will be the conference player of the SWAC tournament. Keep your eyes on that. Cactus Jack came out. Excellent games. Nobody went undefeated this year. It's my understanding that there's a framing that a point difference was that Jackson State won the tournament, although there were 4 teams tied at 2-1, and 2 of them went 1-2, which means no team went undefeated, but also no team came out winless. So that's a good thing. Alabama A&M got a big win, come from behind get their one victory, oddly enough, against Jack State that ultimately claimed everything. So fascinating to see how that went, but some really good games, some games that got out of it, but a lot of fun. Kudos to Brian and Charles for calling those games, play-by-play, color in the mix, doing a great job keeping people informed. Shout out to Roy, Black College Sports Network, for being able to broadcast that game. A lot of people working, getting stuff done. And shout out to all those involved with the Cactus Jack Classic in terms of making that work. So just wanted to kind of acknowledge what went on there. Good stuff, including Darrell Wade, who retired. Saw him with a little tear in his eye. He was able to bring his Paul Quinn team to be honored. Prairie View had a team that was honored that was in the Hall of Fame. They got their jacket. So a lot of celebration, a lot of good stuff, a lot of vendors out there. It got a little cool, but outside of that, excellent in terms of the tournament. Shout out to Deuce, my son, and Miles, Ryan McGinty's son, that were out there working, statting the games, writing stuff up so they could do their analysis. I'm just quite amazed in terms of the level of seriousness they take it. And everybody's in there kind of looking at them like, oh, they for real. So that's a little HBCU news I wanted to get out there. But let's take our first break. We'll come back on the other side. We'll get in the top 5 poll rankings for week number 7 on the women's side right after this first break.
Planning an event? From weddings to corporate functions, CMJ Events LLC brings over 15 years of experience to make your vision a reality. Based in Metro Atlanta and serving statewide, even internationally, we provide versatile event planning and authentic catering cuisines tailored to your needs. Whether it's pre-game meals for student athletes, fundraisers, weddings, corporate functions, CMJ Events LLC is your one-stop solution for exceptional service and unforgettable food. Our diverse culinary heritage means we cater to all cultural tastes, dietary needs, and food restrictions, making every meal uniquely yours. Let's make your next event unforgettable. Visit us on all social media at CMJ Events LLC or email us at cmjeventsllc@gmail.com. Also give us a call at 404-664-3882 so that we can start planning now.
This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app, as we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
You're looking for the latest information on Southern University sports, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, and HBCU athletics. There's only one place to go. Tune in to the Carlos Brown Show, exclusively on the Black College Sports Network.
Thank you guys for what you do for HBCU athletics. This is a fantastic avenue for all of us. This is our ESPN, so we love what you guys do. Brian, AD, Roy, all you guys at BCSN. We really appreciate what it is that you guys do for us.
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Charles Bishop, Wilton Jackson II, and Brian Fulford. As we get into it, I wanted to give a little update there in terms of a mix as we get into it. Just excited about the rankings as we talk about what's going on in the mix. I'm going to shout out Mike. I'm not going to say his last name because he didn't give me permission to do this part, so I'm going to keep it safe. But Brian, I don't know what it is about the FAMU, the Rattlers out there in the Rattler country about the parlays and betting. Mike keeps me informed and has me a new understanding of what the betting parlances and all the information about betting. And it's fascinating to me because he's in it on the HBCUs. He does the other stuff too, but he's in it on the HBCUs. And now that you can get the men's side in terms of bets from ESPN bets and other ones out there about the parlays, it's fascinating to see how I knew it was serious because just all the money in it, but the fact that we have folks in the HBCU landscape that earn some little snack change here and there, gas money, milk money, as Brian always likes to talk about, is fascinating to me. When he first did it on the show, I was kind of like, man, what is this? This is different. And again, Mike, shout out to Mike in terms of just making sure I understand that. And this is not our Mike. This is a different Mike, FAMU Mike. With that being said, shout out to the Rattlers out there. Brian, shout out to what you do, kind of putting that out in the public space, letting people know it's all right, especially if you have it cost containment now, how you do it. But I wanted to share a little bit of love about that. With that being said, let's get in the major division on the women's side. We do have some changes in terms of the ranking of the top five. Not any changes in particular about teams moving out. Nobody dropped out this week. This is the last 3 weeks essentially where we've had the top five was settled. We've had movement in the top five, but nobody's dropping out. Now the top four outside of that are receiving votes have pretty much stayed the same as well. It's pretty consistent. A lot of teams winning, stay in the middle, but just outside of Howard Bison that are keeping pace with Norfolk State for whatever that means. We'll see as that game comes up at the end of the year. Will it mean something? At least they're doing their duty to make it interesting to tune in. I'll be intrigued if that becomes even a match, but credit to the Howard Bison because they're at least setting themselves up at this point of being 8-1 in the conference race. Alabama A&M Bulldogs, they're steadying pace, but those teams above them have become slotted, but they're right there in that top 4 as they sit at 10-3. Coppin State Eagles, they're at 7-2. Probably one of the quiet surprises out there in terms of a really good, solid season this year, rolling and getting it done for the ladies over there in Baltimore, Maryland. The Eagles are soaring at this point. Grambling State Tigers, 8-5, dipped a little bit early, but they've kind of settled things down, still in the mix, but they're outside of that top 5. With that being said, let's get into the top 5 and see what you all gentlemen think about this top 5 in week number 7. Starting with number 5, we have North Carolina A&T. The Aggies are 10-2. They're still on pace for the Coastal Athletic Association, better known as the Colonial, as I like to tease and say around these parts. They remain at number 5 after dropping last week, 56 points. They've gotten a win, so they kind of leveled things, but they're keeping pace. And it's one to keep your eyes on. Can they find a way to get that regular season championship in the Coastal, as they just missed it last year? They're on pace to have it this year. We'll see if they can close it out strong. At number 4, Jackson State Tigers, 11-2. They've won 5 straight games, so they're playing some really good basketball. A lot of that is because of what teams are doing ahead of them, but they have a big matchup this week, and we'll talk about that as we get into 3. But Jackson State at number 4 has 61 points, and they do drop a spot as some teams move around. At number 3, we have Texas Southern Tigers at 11-2. They drop a spot and some first place votes. They still have one. Somebody still believes in the Texas Southern Tigers, even though they've lost 2 straight, including a top 5 matchup against Southern. They lost this past weekend. They lost by 10. Those that keep up with this stuff early, remember at the beginning of the season, Texas Southern, what many people saw at that time as an upset, defeated Southern. It was by 11. So in terms of tiebreakers, if that ever comes, Texas Southern still has the 1-point tiebreaker, which is a head-to-head tie between those teams in terms of seeding in the tournament. So something to start thinking about as we get going. Credit to Southern Jaguars that they got it done. They improved 11-2. They have won first place vote as they've added that with that victory. They have been able to pull away a first place vote. Looks like from Texas Southern Tigers at 73 points, and they move up 2 spots to their credit with that big home win against Texas Southern Tigers. With that being said, number 1, Norfolk State Spartans, 9-0. They just keep rolling. They've added a first place vote with 6. They have 79 points, and they remain at number 1 as they continue to chart out things. So Norfolk State adds a first place vote as the Spartans remain number 1 in the top spot in week number 7. With that being said, get in the mix a little bit here. Also would like to add Southern has won 4 straight to give them their credit. And when you talk about Norfolk State in terms of what they get done, they're rolling as well. They've won 8 straight games, I believe it is, in terms of what they're doing. Actually, 11 straight, I should say, because you include some of those non-conference games they had in the mix as well. With that being said, Wilton Jackson second. I'm going to start out with you. You came in here just not overly dressed. Sometimes, you come in here and you want to go out, so you're not making everybody look bad. You did a little bit of water, so I'm gonna be nice and go ahead and give you the mic to go first and talk about week number 7, the top 5.
Okay, so looking at this top 5, I might get talked about a little bit this week. I will say this.
Go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
I'm gonna say this. I looked at the net rankings for this. I looked at some of the teams that played each other head to head.
I like that. You did your homework. Okay, let's talk.
And also some of the teams that had a bad loss. And so I'll say this up front. Norfolk State solidified number 1. How much faith would we rather say potentially putting North Carolina A&T at number 2? And the only reason I say that is because they have the second, if I'm not mistaken, looking at my net rankings right here, they have the second highest net ranking after Norfolk State. Also, if you look at the latest bracketology, they have basically a play-in matchup. If I'm not mistaken, it would be North Carolina A&T and Texas Southern. which would be in a play-in match right now. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily have to stay that way because there's some other, bracketology changes every, twice a week. So that's just something to think about. Southern, I definitely think Southern should be in the top 5. I actually had them at 3. I'm not mad at them being at 2. With Texas Southern, that loss, not so much of the loss to Grambling, but the way that they lost to Grambling. I think more so that kind of, it's crazy because I just recently talked to Coach Skeet and she was just saying like that loss, it obviously no team wants to lose, but that loss was like a wake-up call for them because in a way the team had gotten complacent. And so kind of restart and reset to finish the season and to get to, if their goal is to still essentially be that team that potentially plays for a conference title and get to the tournament, they got to reset, and they got to reset fast because teams, they know their scout, they know what they're going to do, they know what Texas Southern is about. So that's something to think about. Then, too, how much faith do we have in Howard? Because you could have argued that Howard could have been in the top 5 too. I mean, a net ranking that's pretty high as well. So again, just some things to think about. But for the most part, who we have in Norfolk State, Southern, Texas Southern, Jackson State, and A&T, I'm okay with that. Just some things to think about going forward as we get closer to respective conference tournaments, and then obviously the NCAA tournament.
Dr. Carey says, speak on it, Wilton. So you got somebody that believes in your net ranking and what you're saying there. And honestly, I think you make some great points in all seriousness. I think some things will shake out. That's why I love the week-to-week because things will play out a little bit. We have that matchup that's going to be huge between Jackson State and Texas Southern from this Saturday. Obviously, the rivalry matchup will be interesting. You have North Carolina A&T able to make a major statement. If they win the regular season, I think you add that to that net ranking, and with those teams playing at the top, it's a chance that they will shoot up the poll rankings in a couple of weeks. So it'll be fascinating what you say there. When you talk about Howard net ranking, it'll be interesting because, again, that matchup against Norfolk State is sitting out there. They have the ultimate desire to make a huge statement in terms of the regular season. Somehow to get it done. So I think you make some points. I'm intrigued when you talk about Grambling. Although they may not have the season they had closing out last year, they are still essentially a top 10 team.
Oh, for sure.
So I think you got to be careful when we talk about those matchups and losses. Sometimes you got to factor that in. But I think overall, the points that you're making are spot on. With that being said, let me go to Brian and get his thoughts on the top 5 as Wilton put some cards on the table and made some really good arguments. Let me see where Brian is going and his thoughts on the poll.
I love Wilton's thought processes. Wilton instantly going to the net rankings, which is where I started to go. And I'll tell you what's fascinating. Despite how highly rated Norfolk State is, how highly rated North Carolina A&T is, they are in one bid leagues. Mm-hmm. And so I will now is basketball season. I will get on my high horse and talk about what? Why conferences need to allow the regular season champions to go to the tournament and stop being fooled by allowing the ESPN to dictate by giving them this extra television coverage of creating this tournament. All it takes is one bad day. North Carolina A&T, one bad day. Norfolk State, one bad day. Bracketology, Wilton just mentioned it. I'm looking, Norfolk State is a 14 seed right now.
Yep.
But one bad day in the tournament, guess what? Done. Not going to get an extra invite. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. North Carolina A&T is like a 16 seed playing.
Yep.
One bad day, out. So, look, I love the rankings. I love seeing where they're at. But, man, I know these coaches don't think like that. These coaches are focused. They're going one game at a time. We're focused on our – but the conferences, please wake up. You're going to miss the opportunity. Should one of these teams stumble? We saw it. We seen it. Charles knows. Wilton knows.
Oh, yeah.
The Jackson State team. One bad stumble. That's it. A bad shooting night. You're done. You're done. Not saying another team doesn't deserve it, but you have to play the game. conferences need to play the game. The game is rigged against us, and y'all aren't playing the game. Play the game.
But Brian, that's the magic of March Madness.
Oh Lord,
that is the element.
Hey man,
that we
you a
love.
gambling man. You the one supposed to know all that. You the one got me excited about the gambling. Now you want to take it away and make it a sure bet. It don't work like that. I will say this though, just for the measure, you must be conferencing with Carlos Brown, our colleague that does this show on Saturday. We'll shout him out with all his colleagues that put that together. Charles Eggman, the AD, and Coach Pettaway in terms of getting it done. They do a marvelous job in terms of providing different perspectives. I will say this, that it's not so much ESPN. You may not realize a couple of years ago when so many HBCUs were getting the AP problems in not having sanction from the NCAA where they couldn't go to the tournament. There were a couple of years where it worked out that the NCAA changed the rule, and they've always said that you could select your champion. It could be regular season or the tournament. That's not up to the ESPN or the NCAA. That's a conference decision in terms of the presidents and the chancellors. They make that decision in terms if they want the regular season or the tournament. ESPN just wants the tournament and television. They'll pay you for it in terms of putting that on there, and it gets a little magic and it makes it nice when they can say that the winner goes dancing. But we had it a couple of years ago with the regular season tournament, just in case a team that was not eligible to go won the tournament. And it was actually a championship matchup. It worked out. Well, I think it was Texas Southern that won over Southern that I think was ineligible or something like that. Don't quote me. The years get foggy when that stuff is put together. But that was the case. If it would have happened, that you would have had to go back to the team losing the championship game would have won it, or you could have used the regular season. So I wanted to make sure we put that out there.
Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you. Did not know it went down like that. Good to know.
Yeah, that you had that choice to make that decision. I will say this. I've got into this in terms of analysis a little bit about this as we kind of diatribe before we close out and give Charles a chance to give his analysis, is that, I mean, all this is sports and it's a chance. So I do like the regular season because it's a marathon, and I think there should be significant recognition for that. Maybe you put more money associated with the team that wins the regular season so they get a part of the pot more, even if they don't go to the tournament, because it is a significant measure to do that. But I'm always at this point, just because you do it over the mile does not mean that you're the best team at the end of the year. We see how close these races are. Sometimes they're going to be tiebreakers that determine the number one seed. Sometimes it's just one game. You got players that get injured or a couple of players that are not as strong as they were in the regular season, and that's just part of the magic. So there's no definition just because you win the conference, especially if you lap everybody and you're not playing well at the end. You could be the regular season champion and go to the tournament, and you may not be the hottest team or the best team playing at that time. You just did it over the longer period of time, which I think you deserve credit for. But I think we have to be careful to suggest that just because you win the tournament, that you're the best team to represent the conference in terms of how you playing at the end of the season. You're the best team in terms of what you did for the whole overall season, but not necessarily the best team at that time. Go ahead, Charles. What are your thoughts on the top five?
Oh, well, I think no argument with regards to Norfolk State being number one. Wilson, I like your point because we're at that point in the season where we start paying attention to the bracketology part. So definitely you put North Carolina A&T up higher. I feel that. That's somewhere I can go. Talking with Texas Southern coaches today, Doc, and I think it speaks to the parity that they talk about in this league and the talent of coaching in terms of what Grambling and Southern were able to do this weekend to stop Texas Southern, to really keep their offense from flowing the way it did. And I tell you, sometimes standing beside Dr. Granger when he's watching these games, he pick up
cheat codes, baby.
It is a
free cheat code.
A free cheat code. And one of the things I remember him saying at the beginning of the season, and he said that's something they're going to have to work on, is when teams speed Texas Southern up, they created turnovers. And he said that's going to catch up to them at some point. And we saw it finally happen this weekend where Southern and Grambling sped them up. and they did. They had a tremendous amount of turnovers, and both teams were able to capitalize on those turnovers. So it's something to pay attention to going forward. And just kind of being around practice today, you saw them, trying to go over their machinations in terms of what they're going to do when they see traps and things of that nature. So that was kind of fascinating to kind of sit up and watch.
Charles going in and saying he had practice. He's talking to the coaches. I mean, you're going to drop the mic on stuff like that. Okay, Charles, we understand that you are serious about your craft, but my goodness, wow. You see how he did that? I mean, just real nice, too, smooth. Wilton, I thought you smooth. You see how your partner? You must be rubbing off on me.
I'm just following
some pointers or something. I don't know what it is, but he
following behind the man, man. Just following behind the man.
That being said, we're gonna take our second break. We overdid it, but I thought it was good dialogue. We'll come back on the other side. We'll get into the men's side where there are a couple of changes. We'll see what those changes look like right after this second break.
Since 2002, Empowerment Resources, Inc., a nonprofit organization, has empowered more than 1,500 youth and adults in Duval and surrounding counties through its programs Journey into Womanhood, Girls Mentoring, Life Skills for Teens, and Parenting Education Coaching. To get involved with programs, volunteer, or donate, visit www.empowermentresourcesinc.org. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/empowerment.resources and instagram.com/empowermentJAX.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids' apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
When it comes to professional learning, teachers deserve better. From the leader in online learning, Stride brings you the Stride Professional Development Center, an on-demand library of mobile-friendly courses that gives teachers choice and flexibility, allowing them to learn anytime and anywhere. Our dynamic courses provide bite-sized learning and help educators advance their knowledge while also gaining professional development hours. It's time you take charge of your learning. Visit us today to get started.
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment, so we have none other than Wilton Jackson II and Brian Fulford. As we start to get into the magic here, I want to talk about the rankings. We did have a team drop out of this week, which means we have a new team jumping in. So I want y'all to see what that looks like. In terms of the rankings, Bethune-Cookman Wildcats actually dropped out. Let's look at the next five in the rankings in terms of those receiving votes. Tennessee State, that was hot. They had won like 7 of the last 8, and they ran into SIU Evansville, who they just can't quite defeat. They lost to them earlier before they started that streak in double overtime, and then they took a loss this past Saturday. So struggling a little bit there. As we talk about Bethune-Cookman, as we said, they dropped out. They lost 2 straight at home. This is after winning 4 straight. So I was interested in seeing what that looks like. They're dealing with injuries. They were able to get on the road and get that done, which I thought was kind of fascinating when you talk about those tough losses from that perspective. But as those that are receiving votes, we have Howard Bison that had 6-3. You have Texas Southern that has lost 2 straight and lost against Southern, game that was on ESPNU. They fall to 8-5. You have Alcorn State Braves. They're split on their road. They're at 8-5. Yeah, Bethune-Cookman Wildcats we talked about that dropped out. They're at 8-5, still receiving votes. And you have Alabama State that has quietly moved in the mix in terms of what they're able to get done. So a little bit of fascinating work. And when you talk about the Alabama State Hornets playing some pretty good basketball as they have won 3 straight. With that being said, as we get into the top 5, let's look at number 5. This is the new team that's the interest into the mix here, which is the South Carolina State Bulldogs. Out of the MEAC, as you know, playing some really good basketball in terms of what they're getting done. They've won 4 straight in terms of letting you know how hot they are. So they're now at 8-5, 53 points as they enter into the top 5. One of those teams that are fascinating to me in terms of they have that matchup against a SWAC school, Bethune-Cookman. They lost that matchup as Bethune-Cookman won another one. Well, with that being said, let's get into number 4. The Jackson State Tigers sit at 9-4. They had a really solid road trip in terms of splitting, particularly when you talk about how both those teams were playing, as one of them has continued to even get hotter in terms of the matchup that was played this Saturday. Jackson State is at 9-4 now, 69 points. They do fall a spot after they lost to FAMU. Speaking of FAMU, look who's number 3. The Florida A&M Rattlers, 9-4, won first place vote, 88 points. As the Rattlers are red hot, you have the coach talking about who believed in them, the work, letting the world know, setting Instagram on fire. I will say that Brian has said for a long time, he's championing the guy. He should have said he should have got the contract at the beginning. He said weekly as they started to make their move, don't waste your time, get it done. And the board listened to Brian. Last Thursday extended him. Or at least we'll say that on our pages that's who they will listen to, that he made a special call over there with a couple of key of the board trustees, as they say, around those points. But they added 1 first place vote, which I thought was just as impressive. They move up 2 spots at 88 points. It'll be interesting to see as they track down the road. They have a matchup with Southern where they get them back at home. I'm really intrigued at what that would look like. Hopefully that game is broadcast so we all can see it, because I think it could be one to watch. At this point, it would be featuring a top 3 matchup. With that being said, let's go to number 2. Number 2 on the list is Norfolk State Spartans, 8-1. They're kind of finding themselves, it looks like, as they're playing even better basketball, and they're separating themselves from the field. They still have Howard maybe in the mix a little bit to see what that looks like, but now they got a 2-game spread over South Carolina State and Howard. So fascinating to see as they will face South Carolina State in a couple of weeks. We'll see what that looks like. But right now, Norfolk State Spartans sit at 8-1 with 4 first place votes, 103 points, and remain at number 2 in week number 7's top poll. With that being said, Southern Jaguars, as they took a loss a couple of weeks ago, but they bounced back this week. Big 2, including a matchup at the time that was featuring a top 5. A top 10 matchup against Texas Southern. And everybody that hadn't had a chance to see them because they're behind a paywall in terms of watching those matchups, it was broadcast on ESPNU. So a lot of people got to see Southern for the first time. What was intriguing about me is just what you've heard a lot of talk about is the toughness, but just how tough they play. If you don't come ready physical as they're deep off the bench, spread. Obviously the points around, but they spread on defense of how they attack you and can cause you to make mistakes. So credit to what Southern is doing. They're at 12-1, 6 first place votes, 104 points. It looks like they're going to be able to close solidly on the season. It would take a major clap at this point with the spread they have with the 2 teams sitting at 2 spot, which is FAMU and Jackson State. But that matchup again between FAMU and Southern is going to be fascinating to see what that looks like as Southern looks to close things out. They have the big matchup against Grambling, which is always intriguing. They have that road trip to Florida, and then they host the Alabama. So interesting as they close on their last 5. With that being said, I'm going to start with you, Charles, as we didn't give you a lot of shine on the last one. We'll give you a chance to start it off in terms of what are your thoughts in the top 5, particularly with the South Carolina State Bulldogs team that is jumping into the top 5. Any thoughts on them in particular, or do you want to go in a different direction with the other teams in the top 5?
Well, I will say it's impressive to see South Carolina State basketball-wise sitting there at number 5. Like you said, they've been doing a bang-up job over the past few weeks. I will say watching Southern last night, that is a team full of Jimmy Butler types. I mean, they gonna get to the free throw line. I mean, and if you can't keep them out of the lane, you are in trouble. And they got a bunch of thick body guys that can whoop on you. And then they play hard-nosed defense, and you kind of see why they are where they are within the standings. Number one, but that was a tremendous win last night for the nation to see watching Southern. I can't say enough about FAMU right now. I mean, they are just playing tremendous basketball. You got to give it up to them in terms of what they were able to do this weekend. Alcorn had kind of gotten on a little run, and then FAMU shut that down. So, kudos to FAM. I mean, knocking off Alcorn and Jackson State over the weekend. I will say Jackson State getting the split. I did not see Bethune-Cookman losing 2 this weekend. So that was huge for Jackson State to get the split against Bethune-Cookman Wildcats.
That's a great point. It reminds me of the yesteryears, I'll say, because it's been a while, when that trip to Texas, going west, was one of those trips that everybody was like, man, can we find a way to get one? Now people can start talking about going east in Florida. Can you find a way to get one while you're down there? You did pretty well. With that being said, I'm going to go to you, Wilkie, and get your thoughts in terms of what's taking place in the top 5.
Now, this top 5, I think, is really solid. I'll start with 5. I think when I really started to truly notice South Carolina State was when they went to overtime against Norfolk State at the beginning of February. Yeah, that's when I really started to think, like, okay, taking the top team in the MEAC, pretty much to the ropes. I said, if they can continue to play like that and continue to play well, which they have, this is going to be a team to watch when you start talking about MEAC tournament time, and that's coming up really close. So I'm good with them being at number 5. Obviously, Charles alluded to it with Jackson State getting the win against Bethune-Cookman on the road. I thought that was really good. A hell of a performance from Shannon Grant last night. He had 20 at them. It's actually a player I've been kind of heavy on, the fact that I noticed that Jackson State has a lot of size with him. And, of course, Romeo Manziel. Anytime they can get them involved amongst the shooters that they have on the team is always a good sign. I can't find enough superlatives to talk about FAMU. I mean, if I'm that coach, I mean, he said it. I don't even have no other words to say, Brian. I mean, you got the right words to describe it. Like, I'm good with what he said. I mean, I'm glad he's gonna, get the extension, the contract. I mean, he's basically coached his butt off. FAMU's playing really, really well. Absolutely. If I had to do anything to switch, I would maybe put Norfolk State above Southern. Not by much, obviously, because I feel like these two teams are the best amongst D1 HBCUs. I just would have given Norfolk State the edge just based off of net ranking right now. That's all.
That's good stuff. Before I go to you, Brian, I want to set this up because you talked about South Carolina State as well as Charles. This is their closing schedule, so they will have the ultimate say of what goes down in the MEAC in a lot of ways, or really get the closeout strong. They're on the road at Delaware State, middle of the pack team that has shown that they can get some wins. Maryland Eastern Shore shouldn't be a problem, but you never know. It is on the road, but this is what they close with at home. They have Norfolk State, Howard, and then North Carolina Central that's struggling a little bit, but always tough rivalry game in terms of the interstate matchup there. But they got all those games at home.
Wow.
I don't think you could ask for more than that.
Yeah.
In terms of the ability to make a closing statement before you get into the tournament. So I'm interested to see what the Bulldogs of South Carolina State do on the hardwood. With that being said, let me go to you, Brian. What are your thoughts in terms of the top 5? What direction are you going in terms of week number 7?
Well, Doc, what's interesting about South Carolina State is, if I'm not mistaken, it was just maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3, when they were one of the worst basketball programs in Division I among 370, 60 something schools. I mean, they were down there with Valley and Chicago State and, that. And so to see them kind of move up to like the net ratings are about, in the 200s. But more importantly, they've got 4 legitimate non-conference wins. One of them was a SWAC school, Alabama A&M, and then 3 others against, what you call quad 4 programs. So it helps them. It's very impressive. And that's the thing I think that hurts when you look at the MEAC, when you have South Carolina State and Norfolk State compared to the top teams from the SWAC, with the exception of Southern, the top teams in the SWAC. I mean, it is nice when you look over at the SWAC standings and you look at how from just last weekend, right? When you think about the top 6 teams in the SWAC last weekend, a little bit different order, right? But because of how close teams, let's just say 2 through 6, how close 2 through 6 are, it can flip just like that in 3 days. The Saturday, Monday, it can change. And that's what I think we're going to have on our hands the next, 3 weekends? That's what's left. 3 weekends of basketball before the SWAC tournament. So I'm really excited, and I'm happy for Coach Crary. I'm happy for the Rattlers. I'm interested to see how Southern holds on. I want to see Southern. And then, look, I'm not sleeping on Jackson State and Alabama State and Bethune. I mean, tough teams. It's going to be fun to watch down the stretch. So, Southern enjoyed. They got a 3-game lead with 6 to go. Enjoy it. See if you can hold on to finish out, or I guess 5 to go, really, because you're playing 18 games, right?
It's such a small margin of error between 1 and 6, I believe, in the men's, as far as just taking a look at, how teams adjust week in, week out. The SWAC tournament is going to be phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. No shortage of excitement at all.
Yeah, you got to be in the top
South
6.
Carolina.
Got to be in the top 6.
Good stuff. Your point with South Carolina State as well, those 4 non-conference D1 wins were all on the road, including one against Alabama A&M, which was a Bulldog tournament. 3 teams played in that, which I like that concept. Shout out to Dr. Bryant and Alabama A&M and the Bulldogs are pulling that off. Like to see more of that, kind of what you see with the home classic. Similar, do it in basketball so you can get a couple more games at home. With that being said, they're one of 4 teams with winning records at this point in the season. I'll include the 5th one that is at 500. But that's fascinating and credit to South Carolina State, particularly when you put on the backdrop where they were in terms of the mix. With that being said, we'll take our last break, come back on the other side, and have a few parting thoughts before we call it a show. Just your general thoughts of where we are in the season. I know we said we're going to have a little bit of thoughts on the topic there. I'll at least put it on the table. And if you have thoughts on that, you can have it, but you may have them on another direction, which is fine. With that being said, we'll take our last break, come back on the other side, give you that update, and we'll call it a show.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down. It's like a loop machine.
You're looking for the latest information on Southern University sports, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, and HBCU athletics. There's only one place to go. Tune in to the Carlos Brown Show, exclusively on the Black College Sports Network.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Hey y'all, it's your girl Sonia from She Say Sports. Make sure to check us out every Friday morning at 9 a.m. on Black College Sports Network, YouTube, and Linktree. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil. We're inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Charles Bishop, Brian Fulford, Wilton Jackson II. I wanted to open this up with the HBCU commissioners reaching out to Congress about the future of the sport and the various sports they have under their umbrella. This is courtesy of HBCUGameDay.com. What's fascinating in terms of this, we've heard that the commissioners said they're coming together to make sure they work together where it fits in a lot of ways. So we've seen that with the MEAC SWAC Challenge and Celebration Bowl that has really gone well. SIAC and the CIAA. We're hearing that the Black College Football Classic will be a game that opens this season that features the previous year's champions of those two conferences. It looks like that is moving forward. And there may be some news also coming back with CIAA and SIAC working together in different avenues as well in the next year or so. But on this, they're specifically reached out, as this says, the commissioners of the 4 NCAA HBCU conferences, CIAA, MEAC, SIAC, and SWAC, sent a letter to the Congressional Black Caucus urging action to protect the future of HBCU athletics. Representing 48 institutions and 15,000 student athletes, the commissioners expressed concern about the evolving landscape of college sports, particularly regulatory decisions and lawsuits that could disproportionately harm HBCU programs. Primary concern is the push to classify student athletes, as I like to call them college athletes, as employees. The commissioners argue that unlike major athletic programs, most HBCUs do not generate significant revenue from sports and rely on institutional funding. If college athletes were to reclassified as employees, it could force many HBCU programs to cut sports entirely, eliminating opportunities for college athletes. And you can go get the full letter. Additionally, the commissioners highlighted the growing disparities caused by varying state laws affecting name, image, and likeness, NIL policies, and other regulations. The inconsistency creates recruitment and retention challenges for HBCU college athletes, further widening the competitive gap between HBCUs and wealthier institutions. Despite this, they gave some acknowledgement of the positive strides made under NCAA President Charlie Baker, including expanding health coverage, financial literacy training, and degree completion support for student athletes. However, the commissioners emphasized that more must be done to ensure that HBCU athletes receive fair treatment and the national government remains consistent. I will say this, I'm openly one of those that targeted what was the Power 5, now known as the Power 4. Some people call it Super 2, or maybe that's the term I use, the Super 2. In regards to unequivocally, I'll be open and say that I believe at that level that athletes should be employees. They should be paid, no question asked. How do you make that work outside of that? I'm not sure about that. But the biggest thing that's interesting to me is they're looking for federal legislation. It's going to be fascinating with what's going on in the federal government. Will that work, move forward? The other thing is the legal side of this, the lawsuits. So now you're talking about federal, congressional legislation versus what the courts are saying, because you have that House settlement that looks like it's coming out in May. It's going to be fascinating in terms of juxtaposition of what the legal system says in Congress, which in a lot of ways to me is all broken, which is a whole nother discussion. But I'm fascinated to see where this is going. We keep hearing reports that came out yesterday in terms of the Super 2, as I like to call them, how they are moving to have more power, not only power amongst their peers in terms of conferences about the college playoffs, but even maybe legislation in terms of the NCAA policies, if you would. So a lot of things are changing, and I'm not sure if legislation is going to be enough, to be frankly with you, if it even ever comes. With that being said, anybody want to touch on that, or do you want to go in another direction as you have your closing statement for the show? Charles, start with you.
Well, I think my question is, and pardon me for my frustration right now with the current political landscape. But I guess my question is, what is the ask of the Congressional Black Caucus? And then what is
the ask is from the commissioners to the Black Caucus to work with the Congress to create federal legislations that rule athletes that they're not employees, so and then maybe some other legislation that helps protect HBCUs and the sporting content. That's
does
what I can tell you.
Does the CBC have the
hell no
political clout, so to speak, to help with this ask?
Well, the thing is let's be frank about this conversation. When you're talking about the Black Caucus, a lot of them are Democrats.
Exactly.
Do the Democratic Party have any say? Hell,
exactly.
Some people could ask about how you look at this is, do the Republican Party have any say? I'm not sure if the levels of the government, the way it is going on, does the House or even the Senate, do they have any say in terms of what's going on in traditionally what we see as the governing body, which is supposed to be three equal governing, but the power that we see going out from the presidential office that continues to try to look like it's growing in terms of that, and without anybody any significantly being able to push back other than try to use the courts, which some people will say is kind of packed, and that may not even help. To be as frank as I can be about this, the system for a lot of folks to see it is broken. So I don't know how you manage within this framework. I do think it's important that you make the ask, but I think you're talking about, Charles, the realistic ability of moving forward. And I'm just being as frank as I can be. Everybody else kind of wants to move around it because they want to believe at some point that it's going to work itself out. I think there's too many things out there to be front facing and say that I don't know how you have that level of trust.
I used to unequivocally believe in the three equal branches of government, and that is slowly being chipped away right now. So I'm curious where if there's a part of the legislative body that can help here. So.
Right. Agree with you. Wilton Jackson II.
I echo a lot of the points that Charles was saying. And essentially, when I saw that letter come out, it just made me think even more like we're really continuing to see a major gap happening between Power 5 and all these other conferences and HBCUs. And you want to kind of also to Charles' point, you want to believe that something is going to happen, but in the reality, and Charles, you really hit on the point when you said with CBC, like, do they, you said, I can't remember the word you said, but in my mind, I was thinking like, do they have the capacity to do it? Like, do they have the true capacity to say like, hey, we need y'all to advocate for this? And to your point, Dr. Cavil, they can ask, but beyond asking, we need action. There has to be some action behind that request and that ask. And I just don't think they're going to have enough.
Well, again, I will say this. The levers of the government that we used to say at play, where there was truly this negotiation back and forth between the parties. So at that point, the Black Caucus, I thought, would have some levels in terms of how they push. But I'm just looking at it from a democratic framework where a large fraction of those are in the caucus way. The Democratic Party did not have a lot of impetus. I would say objectively, even the Republican Party is not serious about negotiation or whatever. It's like whatever the presidential framework says is that they just rubber stamp it or do not stand in the way. So it's not like they are in a position to negotiate anything themselves. They are told what to do in terms of what that looks like. So that apparatus is not working.
Yeah. Congressional Politburo.
Yeah, it's not working. So, Brian, anything you want to add? I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. I've watched this for a while now, and we keep trying to act like this stuff is not in front of us.
Right.
I keep thinking about how the NCAA allowed us to get to this point. You are a organization, an entity that I keep saying college athletics has been in a recession. It feels like it's in a recession-proof industry. They more money keeps being spent. Maybe we could say the distribution wasn't happening. Now it's starting to happen a little bit. But where if you're the NCAA, if you're, where are your controls? Where is your system of leadership? It's non-existent. It feels completely non-existent. All these committees and all these things that are and yes, you have your council of presidents, and you obviously the NCAA works for presidents and the universities, but you've allowed this thing to go completely to spiral so out of control that they sit back and watch, and now unless it's just really egregious, then we'll step in. But we have no control, and now we're looking to Congress. We're looking to Congress of all the things we have happening in the world today, in our country, that we need our government to be focused on. I hate to say it, it's not college athletics. I don't want my government worried about college athletics because we have so many more important things. And I'm saying this as a sports guy who's 24/7, 365, bleed sports, live, breathe, eat sports. But man, that part just, it amazes me how you have not been able to legislate your own business. And so if it falls apart, let it fall apart and, go to a private industry model. But it's amazing, and I think HBCUs are going to have to start thinking outside of the box. Maybe start partnering. Look, there are more schools and universities that probably are in positions similar to HBCUs, maybe not exactly, but there are more schools in that boat than the 68 that are in the other boat making all the money. So it would seem to me that at some point, maybe we might want to look at working with all these other institutions and conferences and trying to figure out a system how to work there. Just a thought.
Yeah. I'll say this in closing. I think all of y'all make some really good points, and I probably bled over a lot of my framework about this. But there is one thing that is kind of a pet peeve out there when we say the NCAA. It needs to be clear. It's just like when we talk about the conference offices. The conference offices are supervised, operated, ran. Voting power is with the presidents and chancellors. The same thing with the NCAA. The president and chancellors own that. All these Power 5 conferences that we talk about, again, now Power 4 because the Pac-12 is the Pac-2 of the NCAA, and those powers that the presidents voted them out. That wasn't the NCAA that voted them out. That was the presidents and chancellors of the other 4. Now they're about to vote out the other 2 because it's Super 2. And that's the presidents and the chancellors. The commissioners do the work that the presidents and chancellors vote on and supports and telling the directors. But let's be very clear on this. If you're pointing fingers, it points at the presidents and the chancellors of these institutions that give the power to the NCAA. The NCAA president just carries it out. The folks that work at the NCAA just carry it out. They do not have the unilateral power to do anything. The other thing that needs to be important here, the NCAA, beyond what the presidents and chancellors told them, which was to litigate any question that came to them about their bylaws and their governing policies. They would legislate it. And for a long time, they were winning in the court. So they were doing something. It changed. The court started saying, no, what you're doing is wrong. We don't agree with that any longer. The lawyers kept pushing and pushing, and they kept stacking up wins. All of a sudden, the NCAA and the president's chancellors that were used to winning started losing. Then they started saying, okay, then the courts started saying that, dictating the policies. It wasn't the NCAA changed what they want to do with the NIA. The courts changed and said what you were doing to college athletes was no longer legal. The term we use, student athletes, basically were turning that term on its head and saying that term that you're using is no longer a legal term. No, what you're doing is taking the rights, starting with name, image, and likeness. That was the courts of this country that made that. That wasn't anything the NCAA did. Wasn't any of the chances the president did. They lost in the courts. So let's make sure that we get all this information straight in terms of the futility of the NCAA. It was the courts of this country that changed all that. And that's why they are trying to go to Congress to get legislation in what I'm telling you now is a dysfunctional body. But that's because they had no choice. They're losing in the courts, just like they're about to lose the NCAA House court case if it's settled. That's a court case. When NCAA went in there and fought to be able to have control, guess what happened? The judge said, no, you're wrong. And they basically sided with the House versus the NCAA, which is the legal ramifications of what you're about to see. They were losing in the courts. Let's make this very clear. So anybody else that wants to talk about, they understand it's not the NCAA, it's the president and chancellors that told the lawyers of the NCAA, their counsel, to fight. And they lost. With that being said, hopefully that clears it up for some folks. And as my alarm goes off, we'll call it a close to the show. It'll be interesting to see how this goes forward in the entire landscape of this country and sports behind it. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, come from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Watts and Charles Bishop, and the big-time guest, Wilton Jackson II, Brian Fulford for driving the mothership. We appreciate you, as we like to say in our terminologies. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watts and Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday. We'll be back on Thursday to give you some more updates, as we'll be back in H&P Arena for a home game to see if the Texas Southern Tigers can rebound after losing 2 straight. We look forward to next week as we discuss the latest news in the lab. We'll see if we get any updates with Charles as he's checking out practice. We'll see if he'll be able to come on the show and give us a little bit of update as the action takes place as he's interviewing coaches and things of that nature. With that being said, follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on DrKenyattacavil. I should say if he's not doing play-by-play of color over here. Facebook and Instagram. Inside the
Great job.
Facebook, YouTube. I'm giving to Wilton. Call it. See, I got him, Brian. He can't say nothing. I got the mic. Turn his mic off. Green Bay continue to move forward. Don't turn it off yet. He has something to say. We'll talk with you soon. Charles?
Of course.
Now turn it off. Wilton?
Lecture.
Brian?
Dismissed.
Now you can all turn it off.